Good morning. It's Tuesday, November 25th. Happy birthday to my mother, who I'm sure is watching. I'm Andrea Jensenberg, filling in for Jim Check, and with me, Ian Burns. How are you?
I'm all right. Happy birthday to your mama.
Oh yes, got a lot of headlines today. Carney and Smith agree on an oil pipeline deal, but Eby's not happy. Has Melanie Joly's time run out? India's Prime Minister Modi has been tweeting about Canadian pensions, and it's confirmed. Mark Carney will continue receiving payments from Brookfield. The mortgage cliff is here, many Canadians facing renewal nightmares, and an update on the Indigenous land title claims from the BC NDP. So starting it off, on Thursday, Ottawa and Alberta are formally announcing a new energy memorandum of understanding. The agreement proposes to streamline federal approvals and bolster carbon capture initiatives, but allegedly stops short of guaranteeing a new West Coast oil pipeline. Sources close to the negotiations, according to the CBC, emphasize that Alberta remains responsible for securing private sector investment and will still need to reach separate agreements with British Columbia and affected Indigenous nations. While the deal removes some regulatory hurdles, many questions remain about the pipeline's commercial viability and political feasibility.
Indeed. And another question, or an immediate question, is why on earth has it taken this long? And then on Thursday, we're going to learn just how long it's going to take. Even added to Mark Carney's sort of first 6 months or so in power, 7 months. It seems to me that there's an attempt being made to just drag this on as long as possible. It's forecast in the next year for there to be a decline in oil prices. A lot of crude heads out there are anticipating a real decline for various reasons. But one of the reasons is that China's economic activity is not up to much, and they're a huge consumer of oil. I've got a feeling that they're going to wait and wait and wait and wait. There'll be legal challenges. Eby's going to continue being what he always is and just being a kind of a sort of wrench in the machine, just trying to ruin everything and delay everything. There's going to be obviously extensive negotiations, and then the oil price will come down, and then you'll hear people saying, "Oh, what's the point anyway? Why should we bother? Like, we're moving away from oil. We don't even get that much money anyway." And then in the end, Alberta will be thwarted. That seems to be the direction it's going in. But that is a very hot take from me, I should say. But this is what we're talking about here isn't necessarily confirmed, but I mean it really is confirmed because the
CBC
federal government has done what it likes to do.
yeah.
Yeah, it's anonymous sources have sent an email to somebody at CBC saying, "Here you go, mate. This is going to happen, and we're just going to give it to you because we love the CBC." And then the Globe and Mail also got hold of it, and they've sort of confirmed it separately. So I mean, it's pretty much confirmed. It's almost like a government press release when the CBC is handed this kind of thing on a plate. So you can basically take it as true. And this is just an attempt. And the Carney government, the Carney press office does this all the time. They try and get extended media coverage of things by putting it out early. Then the next day, a couple of days later, they'll do the actual announcement. Then a couple of days later, there'll be more reaction. And that sort of stretches out the media window, and it gives it more attention. So yeah, I would say it's definitely accurate and true. But I don't know. As for the thing itself, I just don't know if this is going to satisfy Albertans. Like in a way, this puts attention on Danielle Smith now and her future, and whether she can sort of stave off independence and whether she can stay in charge of her party. Because if what I sketched out there earlier, if something like that comes to pass, she's going to be very unpopular, isn't she? Like now that Moses has parted the Red Sea a little bit, all of the legal obstacles, so that theoretically a pipeline could slip through the middle. Now the onus is kind of on Danielle Smith, isn't it? And yeah, she's going to have to actually get it built.
Yeah, and if you're a private sector investor looking at this, is it feasible? Not too sure. One of the main hurdles we talk about to this pipeline is our premier here in BC, David Eby. He's been fighting against this for nearly a decade, and first as the province's Attorney General, we've got a clip from him.
News.
Hi, Premier. Back on the pipeline position, do you feel in any way that your position of kind of a hard no on this caused Ottawa to exclude you from these conversations? Did you get any type of apology from the Prime Minister when he talked today about being cut out of this? And is there any commitment going forward that you're going to be included in it?
I'll let the Prime Minister speak for himself about this. I underlined for the Prime Minister how unacceptable it was to me to have Saskatchewan and Alberta speaking about matters in British Columbia without British Columbia at the table. This is not something that would happen to Quebec. This is not something that would happen to other provinces in the Federation. I don't know why the thought was that it would be okay for it to happen in British Columbia. But regardless, I was very clear that my expectation is that going forward, that British Columbia be at the table and that we're able to participate in these crucially important conversations. We don't have to agree, but it is absolutely crucial that the perspective, knowledge, and relationships of British Columbia are leveraged at that table to make sure that we reach the best conclusion for the people of Canada possible.
I'll double barrel this one to get as much in as I can. Do you feel at all like the announcements from Ottawa on funding and the major projects office in the last few weeks and months were in any attempt to sort of, fatten you up like a plump Christmas goose before Ottawa comes in and drops this pipeline on you? Does it seem genuine looking back that BC got half the major projects when you're about to get whacked with a pipeline? And then also, did the Prime Minister explain what's in the MOU? And can you comment at all about these reports that it would carve out an emissions cap, carve out the tanker exemption, carve out the clean energy regulations, create some sort of tier system on carbon credits, and require the Pathways project from Alberta, which seems to be the broad direction that we're going here?
I'll let the Prime Minister speak about the agreement. The one piece that he underlined for me was that the agreement was not finalized at this point, and my expectation and hope is that BC's feedback is incorporated into any final agreement, and particularly BC's participation going forward and respect for the role of coastal First Nations.
He does always sort of remind me of the high school kid not invited to the house party.
But why has he not been invited to that house party? The guy that asked the question was bang on, because he's obstinate, he's whiny, and he's also not serious. I'm sorry, Mr. Eby. I've got a soft spot for Mr. Eby because he once got a photograph taken with a curly whirly. So I have a bond with him for that reason. And he used the word daft when we interviewed him. So, he's not a bad egg necessarily as a human being, but I don't think he's a very serious politician. He keeps on saying the same thing over and over again, that it's a fantastical project. There's no proponent. It's imaginary. What else does he say?
Well, he's one of the...
he tries to undermine it. He talks about oil prices sometimes. Well, he just tries to undermine it in fundamentally unserious ways that anybody can see is ridiculous. And on the face of it, it's just false, and it's not a real reason to resist. And the other thing is, when he keeps coming out with this, if we have this pipeline, then these First Nations will withdraw their consent for these other things we've got. It's very tiresome, and it's not really plausible either.
Nope. And we've got comments from Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe on the pipeline as well.
Are you actually at the table with Premier Smith and Prime Minister Carney? Because that is how it has been portrayed in the last little while.
Yeah, no, I don't know that. Well, like I said, we wouldn't be a signatory if there is a forthcoming MOU or anything of that nature. Largely, we don't have any significant amount of energy in that particular pipe. However, the indirect benefits to Saskatchewan, and I would say more broadly to Canadians, are tremendous, including those Canadians that live in British Columbia. And so we have been in discussions with the Prime Minister and our federal cabinet colleagues on a number of different topics, including this topic.
So just to be clear, though, you're not part of the negotiation. You're not at the table, because Premier Eby last week seemed to really be quite upset at any kind of notion that you would be at the table with Premier Smith and with Prime Minister Carney without him. I just want to make sure that that's clear. You're not at those negotiations.
Well, let's be clear about what this is as well. This is a federal decision, whether it be around some of the policies, the unconsulted policies, I might add, that were put in, whether it be Bill C-69, the tanker ban, the emissions cap. All of those were unconsulted policies put in by the previous Prime Minister. Alberta and Saskatchewan were not consulted in any of those cases. However, in this case, should this project move forward, and I would expect that if there's some tweaks to those policies, that you will see, private proponents come forward to not only build a new pipeline to the Northwest Coast, but to expand the existing capacity that we have through the TMX, or likely to add pipeline capacity through what was KXL, now maybe is the South Bow project. We need all of these projects to move forward so that we can expand our energy industry of all kinds, whether it's LNG and oil. So we're in discussions with not only Alberta, but the federal government all the time on numerous topics. In this case, we are much, and we've always been clear, we're much more of an advocate on behalf of this project because of what it can do for each and all of us as Canadians.
Recent polling data does show that the majority of Canadians, including BC residents, support the idea of a pipeline to the North Coast. And I think that is because we see that we could generate massive amounts of wealth for the country. All Canadians could benefit.
Well, Mark Carney just won a minority government not that long ago on that premise, on the idea that we're under attack from, the Navy SEALs are going to come over and conquer Canada any minute. So we have to look after ourselves, and we can't act like we used to and just sell all our oil and everything else to the Americans. That was that was what was put on the table, not just by Carney, but obviously also by Poilievre. So those two parties combined represent something like 80% of all votes cast. Like, the Canadian people want this, which makes it all the stranger that David Eby is just so adamant. He's so dead set against it. But I would also just point out, listen to Scott Moe there. Or you can, Danielle Smith as well sometimes, so most of the time I would say this is true of Danielle Smith. You listen to them, and these are the two politicians in Canada that are considered to be they're out there, they're like the firebrands. They're the crazy revolutionaries that are trying to bring the house down, sort of thing. That's often how they're portrayed. But just listen to Scott Moe. It's completely innocuous, very professional. It's the kind of thing you would hear in a random meeting in any company, a Teams meeting, any company in Canada. He's a pretty sort of straightforward dude. And then you contrast that with David Eby, who's just so indiscreet. He would never get a job as the PBO, would he? His discretion is not something that he's good at. He's constantly coming out saying, attacking Scott Moe, attacking Doug Ford, attacking Quebec, attacking Alberta, most of all, and the federal government. It's just relentless from David Eby. And again, you wonder, why has he not been invited to the party? Why would you invite somebody like that to your party? It's a waste of time. But I just find it so interesting that because he's a left radical rather than a right radical, he doesn't really get scrutinized very much, at least not by the talking heads and the legacy media, the usual suspects. They much prefer to get angry about Danielle Smith. And there's an opinion article in the Globe and Mail that kind of accompanied their story about this MOU. And it's just attacking Danielle Smith for being an opportunist and not really caring about Canada. And I just think, how does David Eby get away with that? Not a day goes by that he doesn't come out and insults another premier or the federal government and uses such extraordinary language. He's not a particularly responsible chap. And I think if there's any political justice in the world, that will come back to bite him at some point.
Another politician who tends to be a bit dramatic with her press conferences, Melanie Joly, is rumored to be out soon. She could be gone from the cabinet within weeks.
Well, Jim and I, in previous episodes, if you consult our back catalogue, we've wondered many times out loud why it is that she's even in the cabinet, because she's 100% a Trudeau acolyte, isn't she? She's there because of Justin Trudeau. She's there because
I love her outfits.
No, her hair as well. Let's not forget the hair. She does look quite well done up. She presents herself well, but that's, maybe that's good enough to be ambassador to France. But the things that she says and does, which are a bit more important when you're a cabinet minister, are not so well put together, I don't think. And it's just a curiosity why he kept like her, Stephen Guilbeault, some other people, Champagne, I would even include in that. Why were those Trudeau appointees, why were they kept in the Carney cabinet? And I think what Lily is saying here, and he's not the first to have said this, he's saying that the reason is Carney just kind of stepped in while he got on the train while it was still moving, didn't he? And he had to just make do with the passengers that were there. But he's slowly trying to disembark the useless ones. And Melanie Joly is, we're talking about not being serious in politics. There is nothing serious about Melanie Joly. In fact, the most serious thing about it probably is her dress sense, as you pointed out. That is probably the most consistent and worthy thing about her, or worth consideration, because she doesn't understand politics. She doesn't understand the world. She doesn't understand economics. If your boss is Mark Carney, who's supposed to be this kind of ruthless pragmatist that demands excellence from his subordinates, you're not going to be hanging around very long, are you, if you're somebody like Melanie Joly?
No, you're not. And Prime Minister Carney has been keeping busy. He's been in talks with India about a potential trade deal. And now Prime Minister Modi is tweeting about Canadian pension funds.
Just wait till he starts tweeting about visas, because India tends to attach more liberal visas for Indians to every trade deal, basically, because, well, there's many complicated reasons for that, but the Indian governments like to do that. So when that happens, that'll be a big story, and everybody will get quite upset about it. But the pension funds, I mean, I think probably Mark Carney's put this idea in his head, because he's always talking about Canada's pension funds, and that is in terms of, some countries have like sovereign wealth funds, like Saudi Arabia or whatever. So if you want to do business with the Saudis, inevitably you're going to want to try and get your greasy fingers on that sovereign wealth fund, and you're going to say, give me a few billion, mate, come and invest in this thing, and promise returns, obviously. But when it comes to Canada, there is no sovereign wealth fund, of course. But the pension funds are the closest thing to that for Canada. So I guess it's this great store of capital. And nowadays it just seems to be like de rigueur. If you want to do a trade deal with someone, it's like, so what asset funds, what capital funds based in your country are going to invest in my country, and how much? Tell me. Like, let's get it. That's part of the discussion. So I guess that's what that's about.
Indeed. We'll see how these trade negotiations unfold. These talks have been happening just days after Prime Minister Carney's announcement of a record $70 billion investment pledge from the UAE, which specifics remain notably scarce.
70 billion question marks. Yeah, we don't know an awful lot about that, but I mean, again, Donald Trump is getting a lot of praise from certain people for all his gigantic deals that he keeps announcing, but they're also extremely light on detail. So again, maybe that's just kind of the way it goes nowadays with international negotiations.
Indeed. And are we seeing the public's money securing these? Is that what we're risking for these investments? Time will tell. Mark Carney's supporters do often praise his mastery of global finance, but does that understanding come with a massive conflict of interest? Brookfield's COO, the original Justin Bieber, spoke to the House of Commons yesterday about his conflicts or potential conflicts of interest.
Was the long-term performance pay structured when Mr. Carney was at Brookfield? Are you able to tell us what metrics determined that pay?
While he was an employee of Brookfield?
Yep.
Like every executive, Mr. Carney was entitled to a compensation package that was comprised of several components. He would have been entitled to a base salary, a short-term annual bonus that's generally expressed as a percentage of that salary, and then the long-term incentive plans that align all of our executives with our shareholders and our clients in both the funds and in the overall performance at Brookfield.
When Mr. Carney left Brookfield, did he retain his unvested interests on standard terms, or were any of his arrangements modified because he was entering public life?
He left on standard terms. He terminated his employment on January 16th.
Standard
he took
terms.
everything that was vested and departed.
Not a good look.
Tell you what else is also not a good look is the chief operating officer of a multi-trillion-dollar company or whatever the hell it is doesn't know what the word comprises means, or comprised actually was the word he used. I just like, what have we just given up on this language of ours? I suppose we have, haven't we? But anyway, as for the rest of this malarkey, yeah, it keeps getting stinkier and stinkier, doesn't it? And the Tories have jumped on this straight away. They released a press release about an hour ago where they've come out and, they've put it in their very sort of partisan terms, but they're zeroing in on this. And as has been the case, even before he became Prime Minister, this is one of his biggest weaknesses, if not his biggest weakness. It's that this relationship that he's had with Brookfield, it's messy, given that Brookfield's tentacles are in almost every sector of Canada's economy, and also in the United States, with whom we're now supposed to be in a trade war and supposed to be the kind of raison d'etre of Mark Carney's, government. So yeah, it's not going to go away, is it? It's just relentlessly awkward. The only thing that I'm sort of waiting for, I guess, for this to get to the next level is when it finally breaks through into like CBC, CTV world and all the rest of it. Because if that was the only news that you read, you would know nothing about this at all.
Indeed, and it does seem like the entanglement gets deeper between Brookfield, Canada. Our investments we've been making, we sent $500 million to that European Space Agency, and Brookfield owns 50% of the real estate that the agency is located on. So there's just, you can Google it yourself, there's so many little connections that keep coming to light. And as we're about to hear again from Justin Bieber, there's potentially 2,000 conflicts of interest, and we've only had 5% of them disclosed to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bieber, you stated earlier that there are 2,000 Brookfield-owned and operated companies. I would note that only 103 of these companies have been publicly disclosed by Mr. Carney and are subject to his ethics screen. In other words, 95% of Brookfield companies are not the subject of the ethics screen. Will you undertake to provide a list of the 1,900 other Brookfield companies?
I presume that in conversations and the and discussions with the ethics commissioner, that list was produced based on.
I'm asking you, will you undertake to provide us with a copy of that list? Because when a Brookfield company makes money, Brookfield makes money. You said that. And consistent with that, the success of any of these companies contributes to the value of Mr. Carney's stock options. And so I would submit that it is of material interest. Canadians do deserve the right to know what these other 1,900 companies are, 95% of which are not subject to the ethics screen. So again, will you undertake to provide that list?
Many of those would have no ties to Canada.
So the answer is no. Is that your answer?
I will take it away.
You'll take that under advisement?
Sure.
Okay.
So that was only yesterday in the House of Commons. Seems like a pretty big story, but if we go to the CBC website, let's see what the headlines are. They're always, usually gets a chuckle from one or two of them. Look that up. You got it, Ian?
It's Ukraine. Ukraine is the top story.
Well, it's another good, well, not good story, but it is a top story.
It's certainly a big story. And And then the next one, if you look at the right column on below, endangered barred owl makes extremely rare appearance. That's why we're here. That's why we do this.
Oh, look, something's coming to Canada. Brewing school is relocating to Montreal. That's some capital flowing towards us. Dancing with the Stars, Gen Z. But yeah, nothing about this conflicts of interest talk at the House of Commons.
How many people have died in Gaza since the ceasefire? That's there. That's obviously of enormous importance to Canada and Canadians. Yeah, I mean it's sad, but the Tories, if they're going to go on this hard, and I would say that's suggested by them sending through that press release this morning. Usually, with the first thing they send through, they intend to actually make a noise about it, but they send a lot of stuff, so it's hard to say. But yeah, I reckon if they pick that up and they do a press conference, Pierre Poilievre or something does a press conference about it, then they'll be forced. CBC will be forced to report on it at least a little bit.
Yeah, well, in the States, we see they've got Fox News that'll report the other side. But here, you only ever hear one side. We've got another...
But it's not just Fox. They have a very diverse media now in the United States, I think. They have lots of different voices, even within the sort of liberal side of things. There are lots of different liberal outlets now, like much more pragmatic, sensible liberal outlets. Like the Free Press, that one that got a lot of attention recently. And even the Washington Post sometimes will, now and then, or the Wall Street Journal will do something quite interesting. Then you have the full-blown regime defenders like liberal stalwarts like the New York Times, CNN, and all the rest of it. And then, yeah, you've got Fox. But you also have lots of other ones, like, was it One American Nation or something like that? OAN? Like, there's loads of these new ones. And then that's before you even talk about the gigantic YouTube channels that are bigger than almost any of these. Like the Americans are, in terms of media, the health of their media, I think the Americans are in a pretty decent spot, certainly compared to this country, which is it's just like a wasteland in this country.
Palliative. All right, another clip from the House of Commons. This time it's Tim Hodgson, our Minister of Energy and Resources. So...
I lived in a forestry town. I know what it feels like. I know how important these workers are. That's why we've announced $1.2 billion in support. That's why we're meeting with the leaders of the industry today, and that's why we'll be announcing another set of supports for the industry later this week. We have a trade war, Mr. Speaker. He should wake up.
It's always so dramatic in there. Will $1.2 billion do much for that industry, though?
Don't think so. They've had a lot of support over the years, and it just gets worse and worse, doesn't it? I mean, the problems are systemic, aren't they? And what a ridiculous thing for him to have said that. Like, I've lived in a forestry town. It's like, okay, I've lived all over the place. Does that mean I get to stand up in the Commons and say, like, I've lived in, what can I say? I've lived in a mining town. Let me tell you about mining.
I've lived in
a very strange attitude.
Yep. Canada's forestry sector is in rough shape. And on top of that, Nutrien, the world's largest potash producer, has announced it's building a major new export terminal in the United States instead of Canada. Many in the industry point the finger squarely at federal and provincial regulations. We've got a clip speaking about this as well. I think they chose somewhere in Washington instead of BC's coast was the story, if I'm correct.
They've drove $1.5 billion Canadian dollars out of our economy. Nutrien, who has one of the world's largest potash mines right in Souris Moose Mountain, are building an export facility in the United States. I'll say that again, that's $1.5 billion leaving the Canadian economy and going to the United States. This is happening every day, and if that can happen for a business like Nutrien, imagine what's happening to little businesses all across Canada. Our regulations are making it impossible to get anything done in this country. This is what Liberals like Stephen Guilbeault and our Prime Minister just don't understand. When you have too much regulation in one jurisdiction and make it too hard to do any business, they're going to leave for somewhere else.
Half of gas, 3/4 of coal, etc., maybe up as much as half of oil reserves, proven reserves, need to stay in the ground if we're going to get to where we are.
We have the largest producing potash mine in the entire world in Souris Moose Mountain. And there is no reason why they could not be building this facility in Canada, other than the over-regulation, over-taxation, and overburdening from the people in this building. And that's because of Liberal policy. It's almost impossible to build or create anything in Canada anymore. We have the industrial carbon tax, we have clean fuel standards, we have regulations that make it almost impossible to get anything done. This is why policy matters. If you want to see facilities like this built in Canada, we need to keep fighting regulation, taxation, and the overbearing government that we have in Canada right now. And I can tell you that I'm not going to stop fighting, and our Conservative team will not stop fighting, because these are the kind of things that will make a huge difference for Canada.
Does seem like there's just an insurmountable amount of red tape for a lot of these things.
Well, even we didn't even talk about it, but even with this memorandum of understanding, it's supposed to come with almost kind of like, it's almost like protection money or something like that Alberta has to provide in the form of billions, like 20 billion or something dollars, to build the carbon capture malarkey, which will make absolutely zero difference to global CO2 emissions. It's a, it's kind of
market.
It's a futile exercise, but that's being attached to this. So it's like, not only is it, if you want to build a pipeline, you've got to do all this, speak to these First Nations, to jump through all of these hoops, all this red tape and all the rest of it. But then you also have to build this massive boondoggle to satisfy people like Stephen Guilbeault and people that like voters in Montreal. Places like, it's almost designed to make it as hard as possible. And rather than make it something actually productive, like something that was actually of use to the world, but that could also bring down emissions. Like, for example, why wouldn't they have attached it to nuclear power plants or something like that? It's like, yes, you can have an oil pipeline, but you have to build several nuclear power plants, and so that Alberta's energy mix is like 75% nuclear or something like that. That way, we can remove emissions that way from Alberta's what Alberta contributes to the world. But they wouldn't. Instead, it's no, you have to build a $20 billion hole and pump gas into it for no reason whatsoever. It will make no effect to on the planet, no effect on annual emissions, while the Chinese continue to power their economic revolution with coal. It's very hard to swallow, and it's not just purely red tape. It's also like the philosophical absurdity of it. You're like staring into the face of a madman, and that is often how it is when you have to interact with the federal government or some provincial governments as well. But this potash one is particularly mad because potash is like Canada's secret weapon, or one of Canada's secret weapons. And we heard a lot about potash, didn't we, when it was like, what do the Americans need from us? And now we've just kind of given it to the Americans, and at least we've brought them into the supply chain, the system, to a massive extent. So the David Eby complained about this in that press conference that we took a clip from. He was furious about it. He's furious with Scott Moore for some reason. But he was saying, now we've just given that leverage to the United States, which is true. It's going to now have to cross a border, that potash, which is meant to be, like I say, it's meant to be like our trump card. It's all just bizarre. The fact, and to think that they would put in place this exemption for the oil pipeline, but not something like this. Why not an exemption for potash, which is of immense importance? Don't really understand.
And another blow for Canadians, the mortgage renewal cliff has arrived. Homeowners who secured ultra-low rates of about 1.75% 5 years ago are now facing renewals closer to 4.5%. For many, that means monthly payments rising by hundreds or thousands of dollars. So this at a time when a lot of people lose their jobs, and this trade deal with the United States up in the air. A lot of small businesses are feeling the squeeze, shall we say?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that this kind of time bomb has been ticking for ages, and people have been warned about it for ages as well. But it is a big deal, certainly. And this is the sort of time where Jim would say, bring the rates down even more. Or Doug Ford, for that matter, would say that as well, wouldn't he? Get them down.
Get them down. And I think with Canadians facing all these hurdles and day-to-day, what should we say, problems, Carney's reply over the weekend, who cares, when he was asked about trade talks with Trump, was pretty tone-deaf. We've got a few more reactions on that statement. Yeah. Kate Harrison at the CBC saying he's snarky. I like that word for him. And then we've also got Rachel Gilmore saying that he's ruder to female reporters than male reporters. I've seen a lot of his press conferences. I haven't particularly noticed this. Have you?
I'm loath to agree with the eminent intellectual Rachel Gilmore, but yes, I have noticed this. And I'm not one of these people I'm not going to attribute any sort of nefarious motives there. I'm not saying that it's indicative of misogyny or something like that, which I'm sure a lot of other people are trying to say. But I have noticed that, yeah, that it's particularly women. But that could just be a coincidence. It could just be that they happen to ask the questions that upset them the most. But I have seen him. I've also definitely seen him snap at a male reporter as well. So it's not like it's exclusively women, but it does seem to be strangely frequent that it is a woman. Whatever that means, I don't know. I'm not, like I say, I'm not attributing anything to that.
Yep. Canadian Conservatives are certainly fed up with this government. There was a Conservative town hall in Ajax recently, and we've got a clip from a woman who's very fed up. She's got a pretty good speech.
Who's on the right? Who here has heard of the term PSYOP? Oh, yeah. Everybody look around the room. This is what the Conservative Party looks like. It's a tent full of people from all kinds of backgrounds, different religions, different cultures, different ages. I just met this wonderful young man who's in his 20s, and we all come from different backgrounds of education, of work experience, of life experience. This is what the Conservative Party represents. I am so, pardon my language, fucking fed up with the CBC, with the CTV, with global TV, with the newspapers, with the bullshit that we see over and over and over again, day after day, spewing out these psyops, this brainwashing, this narrative, this control tactic. And I want to know how we, as a tent full of people from all these different backgrounds, and pardon me for swearing, but I'm at my limit here. I'm absolutely at my limit. I want to know how we can spread the truth, spread the facts, and not contain ourselves in these bubbles so we can start educating those idiots that voted this party back in.
Well, one way you can get things moving is by supporting independent media who do actually report on these things.
I would offer that woman a bit of advice though. You're not likely to persuade people to change their voting habits by calling them idiots. Just an idea that you might want to brood on that.
Alrighty, well, we've got a Blacklock story next. A Senate bill mandating health warnings on liquor labels would stigmatize wine drinkers, says a petition by the Wine Growers of Canada. My view on this is it just a waste of money making people add more labels to something?
Well, it's bureaucracy, isn't it?
Did cigarette smoking go down when they added all those pictures? I'm not sure.
Well, it did, certainly, but the question is that did that just correlate, or did it actually cause it to come down? I mean, who knows? I think people were well aware at that point already that cigarettes were dangerous. So you could kind of claim that it helped bring it down even more, but I don't know.
I think people.
But this is a funny one with wine. I mean, there's the obligatory, it's almost monthly article, isn't there, about the Mediterranean diet and saying red wine, is associated with heart health or something like that, like good heart health. Then the next month or the next week, you get an article saying, oh no, if you so much as sniff an alcohol once in your life, you're going to die early. It's like there's just so much ridiculousness out there when it comes to alcohol and wine in particular, red wine, because that's kind of like, I guess, like a middle class, upper class drink, isn't it? So they like to target those people because they might think that they're better off than the vodka drinkers or the beer drinkers or something like that. But it's quite tedious at this point. But I think your point there just gets to the heart of it right off the bat, really, which is it's just another excuse to inflate the bureaucracy, isn't it? I mean, particularly in this of all countries where you have to put it in 2 languages and you have to get special French language experts to approve of the language, and then it has to you have to tell the company to make it so that it aligns and the type doesn't look stupid, and it has to be a certain size. It's just so tiresome. But it's absolutely glorious for bureaucrats, isn't it? And people that like to have bureaucrats in their camp.
Yeah. Well, got Joe Rogan here. He's got some comments on a culture that loves a drink, Britain, and hear from him.
Motherfuckers are pushing digital ID on these people. And once they do digital ID, they're going to attach it to a social credit score. Yep. They're going to attach it to a carbon footprint score. And then they'll be able to control your movement and control you entirely. And most importantly, they've already arrested 12,000 people for social media posts.
That's insane.
Above and beyond every other country. Way above Russia. Russia was like 400 last year. The UK is 12,000. Any criticism of immigration, any criticism of grooming gangs and people being raped, any talk about how horrible this is, they come visit you. It's like someone's trying to destroy England. It's literally like they've got a concerted effort to destroy England, and they're getting away with it.
Yeah, and what happens over there?
It's really crazy. It's really crazy to watch, because the mass immigration's not an accident. If I was going to destroy a country, I would do it exactly the way they're doing it. I'd take away their freedom, take away their ability to protest, take away their guns, which they did in the 90s, and then you start tightening that noose. Tighter and tighter, add more restrictions, more this, more that.
I mean, we're getting closer.
And just the arresting people. When you arrest 12,000 people for social media posts, you don't just arrest people for social media posts. You change people's ability to post about things because of fear. So they self-censor. So you don't even you're hitting them with like this one guy who complained about. There's a famous video where this fucking idiot in a wig. He's one of them judges, and they wear the wigs, the white powdered wigs, and he's sentencing this guy for 20 months for social media posts that are normal, like normal complaints about mass immigration of illegals from other countries that aren't assimilating and that they believe are ruining their society, which there's a real argument for. And that's what online discourse is supposed to be about, like having conversations, like I'm voicing my concern for the way society is running right now because of what's happening, and no one's doing anything about it, and no one's protecting anybody. It's nuts, man.
And we are seeing the erosion of free speech rights in many Western countries. Is Canada going to be following the US or the UK? Mind me. There are a few bills that have been tabled that have some scary wording in them. I've looked into them a bit. We'll see if it passes, but Canada does seem to follow the UK. So
sadly, yeah. As Keir Starmer said, we think together and we act together. We do things together. So, and it's undeniably the case that Canada, or the Liberal Party at least, looks to Britain, which is a bit of a kind of inversion. It used to be the Conservative Party that would do that, whereas the Liberals would be more America-facing or look more to Europe or something like that. For some strange reason, these Liberals absolutely worship at the altar of failed British intellectuals and politicians.
Well,
but it is, Joe Rogan, I should point out there,
the allegations,
just for the sake of accuracy, that he was wrong in a lot of cases there, as he always is. But as is often the case as well, I think he was right in a general sort of vibe kind of way, that it is getting tragic in Britain, and there are people who've been arrested for just the most astonishing things, including even someone was arrested because he was trying to complain about the school principal or something like that at his daughter's school, and he was writing WhatsApp messages, private WhatsApp messages to complain about it. Absolutely nothing bad, like no sort of terrorism or racism or any of that sort of thing. and he was arrested. And you can type that into Google, watch the video where the 6 police officers come to his house. Like, there is no doubt that Britain has lost its freedom of speech, and it is completely crazy. It's completely wacky and out of control. But he said there that you get thrown in jail for criticizing immigration. Yes and no. I mean, go on the Daily Telegraph website or the Times or almost any newspaper in England, and you will see an opinion column of somebody criticizing immigration. It's a very common thing to see. It is possible to criticize immigration, and almost these kind of unstated guidelines that exist. That's almost the most sinister thing about this, because one person can criticize immigration in a pretty sort of feisty way. Somebody like Rod Liddle, for example, a journalist in England, could come out with pretty strong language about immigration. All's well, all's fine. And then somebody on Twitter will post something that for some reason is considered to just cross the line, and then that person is arrested, in some cases even sentenced to time in prison. It's just so arbitrary. It's a catastrophe, really. I mean, it is the death of freedom of speech, and it is a culture of fear, as he said there. Absolutely true. But this other thing about Russia, I don't know about that, really. He says, oh, it's more than in Russia. Russia's a dictatorship. It's an authoritarian dictatorship that doesn't allow. It is not an open society. So the obvious thing that follows from that is, how do you know how many people have been arrested in Russia? I don't. They might say that it's that many, but we don't know. We've got no idea how many people are arrested in Russia for speech offences. It's probably vastly more than any estimates out there, and certainly more than the Russians would admit. And that also applies to China. So, I mean, that might sound like I'm being pedantic, but it's important to tell the truth, I think.
Indeed. All right, moving on to BC News.
Coming to you live from the Now Media Newsroom.
All right, we're talking about this nearly daily now. I think it's probably the most pressing issue in British Columbia, the Indigenous land title claims. The BC NDP now claim they're consulting with private property owners, and that is the reason why they're delaying putting forward a stay in the Cowichan land title claim case.
Well, it was August 11th when this government said they were going to file a stay in the Cowichan case. It was October 29th when they repeated that claim that they were going to file a stay. So here we are now, 4 months have gone by since the Cowichan case, and there's been no action. A stay has not been filed. The Premier has been caught, quite frankly, with his pants down, telling the public one thing but not following through with it. So now, after 4 months, I have a simple question for the Premier. Why did this Premier tell British Columbians that he was going to be filing a stay in this court case when nothing has actually been filed?
We have been hard at work since the decision came out. Not only did we very quickly announce the stay application that we'd be pursuing along with the appeal, we've been meeting on the ground with affected landowners and collecting their stories, which is part of the work that will feed into our stay application. It's our #1 priority, Mr. Speaker. There is no deadline for a stay application, so I think just in terms of the importance that we place on this, we're going to be focused on the work we need to do to file that application, work with all parties involved, and stand up for the private property owners that we are engaging with right now.
Sure, there's no deadline on the stay application, but for the British Columbians affected, I think they would like to have certainty sooner than later.
Indeed, and again, to refer to that press conference that we took a clip from, David Eby, he was saying, hey, he was asked some sort of question about, it was like an indirect question about this, and he came out and he was talking about how within our lifetimes, these people had their land stolen from them. It's just using the language of the sort of revolutionary left. I'm not convinced that's really appropriate at a time like this. You know, when these people here in Richmond could very easily make the argument right back at David Eby and say, actually, it's my land that's been stolen. I own this fee simple. I was a freeholder of this land, and now I'm told I don't have, it's not mine anymore. So
And
I
with
just
this,
feel, David Eby's trying to play both sides, but he's mostly trying to play the sort of First Nations side, and he keeps getting caught out, and it's very awkward. And as this tweet here, which sort of highlights something quite strange, which is, why is he not paying a bigger price for this politically? And I don't really know. I don't really know what the answer is. I mean, it could well be just because the BC Conservatives are in such disarray that he's just like the default guy. It's like, well, I hate all of them, but at least like David Eby and the NDP can go a week without, decapitating each other. So might as well just be them then.
and this is a giant question mark looming because the coast, who knows who owns this? If you're Nutrien, if you're a private investor thinking about building a pipeline, this adds yet another uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, it's just poison, isn't it? It's poison to businesses. It's poison to, like, who would want to buy a house as well in anywhere that was even possibly under a sort of whiff of a land claim?
And
why would you do it?
We build cities historically where Indigenous people would gather, because you build cities where there's resources, that's the place they would be. So I think lots of, especially in the Okanagan, a lot of land is going to be vulnerable, shall we say, to these claims.
But not only that, I mean, look, it's an extremely complicated story, and it's hard to do it justice in a short time frame. But the people often who were living in these areas, the First Nations people, so-called Indigenous, I mean, not truly Indigenous, and because no humans are truly Indigenous, but you're right to point out that it was like good land, or like particularly the coastal, like anybody that's interested in prehistory knows about coastal BC because it was one of the richest ecosystems in the history of the world for hunter-gatherers.
Still the most northern forest, so.
And as a consequence, was fought over, and different groups took control of it over many different waves of migration. I mean, even down there in America, like some of the I think it's the Navajo. I think the Navajo are like a kind of relatively recent arrivals down there in the desert. I think they came from like the Arctic or something. I would really advise people, and I'm, as you can tell, far from an expert on this. I'm trying to learn more all the time, but I would advise people to read a little bit about pre-Columbian America, so America before the Europeans, because there was an awful lot of warfare and an awful lot of conquest. So this idea that land belongs to one group forever, based on who had that land when the first European showed up, that's a very peculiar perspective to adopt, I think, and it's really hard to defend. It's really hard to be like intellectually consistent and defend that, I think.
Yep. And let's move on to our international media section.
Coming to you live from the Now Media Newsroom.
All right, let's hear from RFK Jr. He's going to talk to us about the World Economic Forum.
Where do you stand on the WEF, the World Economic Forum?
It is like, we shouldn't be paying any attention. It's a billionaires' boys club as arranging the world to shift wealth upward and to clamp down totalitarian controls on everybody else. And now they got the capacity to do it. They got all these countries running around doing what they tell them to do. It's astonishing to me that, these people go to Davos in their private jets.
Yes.
And they're able to tell these world leaders, how to govern us in ways that eradicate our constitutional and civil rights and constantly shifting wealth. I mean, COVID, we shifted $4 trillion of wealth upward. We closed all the little guys.
Yeah.
And
Home
we made
Depot
Amazon
was open,
rich,
but
and Google,
yeah.
and they're all colluding with each other to censor the people who are like me who are complaining about it.
We'll say it was the same thing in Toronto during COVID. You had all the big box grocery stores open and all the little local ones closed. It's downtown during that.
No. That was terrible. And obviously compliance was complicated and expensive a lot of the time, and the little businesses just couldn't, that would be an unacceptable proportion of their sort of income to have to comply. Whereas for the big boys, that's fine. Like they can spread it across thousands of outlets and things like that. Yeah.
Yep, and I know the restaurants also in Canada were hit with the plastic ban at the same time as dealing with the COVID stuff, which was a huge expense. So, yeah.
Alongside just absolutely everything else, like revealing that pay transparency thing if you had more than 50 employees. Then in BC, there was the sick days thing. Like, you know, the list goes on and on. If Jim was here, he would know, because obviously as a business owner, he would be able to list them all. But there's so many. Like the burden just keeps getting heavier and heavier on, and particularly in BC, actually, on small businesses. It really is that it's Atlas holding up the world.
Yeah. Why would you want to start a business in BC these days? And the European Union was shining orange because it adopted its first ever law to fight violence against women and domestic violence. Is orange the color of the downtrodden globally?
I don't know. Orange, is that a dig at Trump somehow? I don't get it.
Well, I'm thinking about
don't know what that's supposed to mean.
Here, the Indigenous reconciliation color is orange. Everyone wears the orange shirts, so.
Yeah, that's true. Every child matters. I always thought that was a strange little motto, but
For all the child haters out there, gotta remind them.
yeah, I just got to really emphasize that. Yeah, every child.
And we're back to Britain here with another erosion of rights, perhaps. It's considering scraping jury trials for most cases. That is a terrifying headline. You wrote this story. What do you got to say on it?
What I would say is, I haven't been able to respond to a lot of these comments here because I've been a bit sort of distracted, but Idaho Man 325, who I assume is from Idaho, I would just say to you and any other Americans that are watching, get yourself the Constitution, put it on an altar and bow down to it and kiss it and be grateful for that Constitution. Because what that did,
better than anything else.
What the Constitution did was took all the English rights and liberties and freedoms and the English sort of governing philosophy, common law, and wrote it down and sort of turned the piece of paper into like a sacred monument to the country. And as a consequence, America can't do incredibly stupid things like this, or an American government can't do something like this and scrap jury trial for most prosecutions, most cases. That, I mean, you know, I'm old enough to have grown up in Britain and listened to dusty intellectuals on the BBC talk about how marvelous English common law was, and then contrast it with the likes of South Africa, where they don't have juries, and say, look at these creatures down there in South Africa. They don't even have jury trials because it's, you know, they're not sophisticated enough. They have to have a judge that decides everything. And then here we are in 2025, and the British are looking to do that now. Except, I mean, they're going to exempt a few things like murder and a few sort of cases like that, but it's just, I can't believe it. Jury trial is older than the idea of the English people. It goes back before, it's older than England, and it's even older than the English people. It's older than Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People, which is like one of the first uses of the term the English. This is craziness. This is absolutely demented madness. And it's being implemented by that chap there with the wig on, David Lammy, who I would recommend, if you've got a few minutes today, watch he was on a quiz show in England called Mastermind. Watch his performance, just as an idea of how knowledgeable he is. One of the highlights was asked which king or which monarch succeeded Henry VIII, and he said Henry VII. I'm pretty sure that was the one.
Say Henry IX.
You know, the man. There was no Henry IX, but I mean, the man is an imbecile. I'm sorry to say, he's an absolute buffoon, and he is the chap that's going to now do away with really kind of the sort of keystone of the English common law, which is at least like 1.5 millennia old. So I just go back to Mr. Idaho Man, wherever you are, Boise Man. I've been to Naples, Idaho, but I would just say, get that Constitution, give it a little rub, give it a kiss.
Alrighty, and the U.S. is directing its embassies in Western nations to scrutinize mass migration. Speaking of the U.K. and Canada.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to take control of all the institutions that their opponents, the Democrats, but also certain Republicans, have used for many years now, for decades really. They're trying to take control of that apparatus and use it, yeah. And it's very interesting to see. Once again, though, I should say it's a very good episode for the Americans, this, isn't it? But I'd just say, like, what a sort of amazing country America is, really. The whole West was sold on all of this, including America. Everyone was down for all of this stuff, not just mass immigration, but the DEI stuff, everything else that they've said that they hate. Censorship as well, like starting to close down the freedom to speak and spread ideas and whatnot. That was happening everywhere. The rest of the world never had it in the first place, but it was happening everywhere in the West. And then, these people in America who've now taken control of the Republican Party have almost single-handedly smashed that consensus to pieces. And now here we are having a conversation about a new order. And that's an indication, not just of America's not just aircraft carriers and F-35s and things like that. It's like the cockpit of ideas and energy and everything. It's like absolutely everything depends on the United States, doesn't it? And it's just yet another realization as we see the immigration consensus being smashed to pieces and starting to turn human rights, concepts of human rights and things like that on the people that weaponized it in the Democratic Party and elsewhere. It's kind of amazing to see, and how that has an effect everywhere in the West. It's very intriguing.
Yeah, the pendulum has definitely swung the other way, and one of the bastions of American life, Hollywood, having a historically horrific box office numbers. And I don't know, is it because movies are worse? I haven't seen any of these myself. I used to like to go to the theaters, but
I'm trying to. I mean, another biopic of a living, a biopic of. I'm guessing that's what that is. Biopic of Bruce Springsteen. The guy's not even dead yet.
Yeah.
What are you making a biopic for?
And then they seem to
And I really like Bruce Springsteen, but am I going to watch that? Obviously not. Tron. That's like a cringe 80s film, isn't it? What's that? And The Running Man. That's as well, I think, but not a cringe one, an excellent one. But The Running Man is a good film because of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Why would you make it again without Arnie?
Well, why are
So maybe that's why they suck.
Yeah, seems to be like a pit of money, anyways. All right. Well, that's our show. Thank you for watching Now Media. We're live every day at 9 a.m. This is The Really Big Show.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent.
Hey, how are you?
News you can trust.